Hello, Satanico here, once again from Godlovescomics, and today I'm going to do a relatively short video on two small packages I received of Bronze Age comics from two different dealers on Facebook, and one I've already opened. I did a video on it and did not like the contents of my video, so I'm going to try again. And this small package I'm going to open right now, so you can enjoy. So let's see what we have here. I vaguely remember what was in this package, but maybe not exactly. Let's see if I can cut it open real quick without destroying the contents. Okay. Writing mail envelope, then in a nice cardboard box, nice and safe, nice and sound. These are very good dealers that appear on Facebook. Okay, here's the package. Package number one. Actually, you can get a glimpse of it. Let's go with the, oops, just knocked it over a little bit, my camera. Let's go with the comics I already have opened first, because I feel like they're slightly less exciting, but you can see right there. These all are Marvel team-ups from the Bronze Age. Let's see if I can adjust my camera just a touch. That's pretty good. Let's see. Corto Maltese from Hugo Pratt. Anyway, this is Marvel Team Up number 70, and as you can see, $2. He charged me $2 each for all of these books, and this is Spider-Man and Thor with the Living Monolith. And the reason I ordered most of these is because almost all of them have John Byrne art, with a couple of exceptions. And I have some out of the package, so we can take a look at them. This is number 79, and that is Spider-Man and Red Sonja. What's interesting about this, apparently Mary Jane, Spider-Man's girlfriend, is playing some sort of role in modern comics, you know. I can't remember exactly what the deal is, but this is Mary Jane picking up the Red Sonja sword and becoming Red Sonja to help out her boyfriend, Peter Parker. And so that has maybe some small significance, I don't know. But I only ordered it. I actually have a copy of this already, but this is still Chris Claremont, John Byrne, and Terry Austin. So that's the iconic Uncanny X-Men crew that everyone knows and loves. As you can see, really nice art from John Byrne and Terry Austin. Probably the best inker on Byrne, even though Dan Adkins also did really nice work, and Joe Sinnott, of course, is an absolute legend. But Shogun Warriors advertisement. But let's just look through this briefly. There's a really nice splash page. You can see that. Sort of the Frank Thorne Red Sonja, which was always a little bit more than a little bit sexualized, of course. Kulan Gath. Okay. A little bit of Red Sonja in bondage, a la Wonder Woman from the old days. And this is Marvel Team Up number 75, Spider-Man and Power Man. This also is John Byrne, I do believe, but maybe inked by someone else. Yeah, okay, this is John Byrne and Al Gordon. And I think instantly, and it's still written by Chris Claremont. Well, actually, the plot is Claremont and the script is Ralph Macchio. But I think you can see some noticeable differences in the style. I mean, it's still clearly John Byrne, very skillful draftsmanship, and you know, He draws faces extremely well, but the inking seems a little bit more heavy-handed. Certainly, Terry Austin had a lot of detail in his ink, but had a very light hand in terms of his. Maybe it had something to do with Terry Austin maybe used pens or crow quill, and this is maybe Al Gordon maybe as an inker that used brush, but I'm not sure. Not too familiar with Al Gordon's inks. I've heard of his name, but he's not a guy who appeared an enormous amount, at least in the comics that I have. Pretty nice drawings of Luke Cage, but yeah, it's a much more heavy-handed sort of inking style, but still nice work, once again, from John Byrne. And then this is another great one, number 68, and Spider-Man and Man-Thing, and more John Byrne goodness, this time with Bob Wyacek, so you get to see a lot of, and once again Chris Claremont is writing, but you get to see a lot of different inking styles on Byrne's pencils, different inkers. Bob Wyacek, pretty much a stalwart at Marvel, inks so many things, and certainly pencils some stuff as well. And nice work again. If you get a good look at it. See if I can find one more page. Shows off something. Oh, okay. There's, I don't know, perhaps the first appearance of this villain called Despair. As you can see there. Okay, so that's number 68. And this is number 69. Spider-Man and Havoc from the X-Men. And this is in really nice condition. This is probably very fine. Easily very fine, I would say. I think most of these were supposedly in either very good to fine, maybe very fine. This is John Byrne, and this is another inker, Ricardo Villamonte. And once again, Chris Claremont. So the Claremont and Byrne team are intact. But Terry Austin appeared in one, and then you've got a variety of different inkers in another. And Ricardo Villamonte may be the least impressive, I think, on Byrne's work. The most heavy-handed at times, even though Al Gordon was pretty heavy-handed as well. But actually, this looks pretty nice. Some of it looks a little more rushed than is typical of Byrne, but you see Byrne doing the Beast, which he's very familiar with. Some Thor. And there finally is Havoc. Well, I always thought it was a really cool design. I actually liked Havoc. He was when I first discovered X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men, and I thought he was a really cool character. I was a little bit disappointed that he wasn't involved more in the comics. But he's a co-star in this one, so there you go. And let's go one more page. Yeah. Actually, the inks are quite nice, but as I said, definitely a little more heavy-handed, certainly, than Terry Austin, or even Bob Wyacek, who actually does a pretty nice job. But still a nice issue, 69. And this is number 32. And I believe this, I'm not quite sure, I think this has Sal Buscema art in it, but that is a really nice Gil Kane cover. I've seen this cover online several times. I always liked it, so finally pick it up. I'm pretty sure it's Gil Kane. And I like Son of Satan. I've mentioned that before. So it's a pretty interesting character, even. I don't know if they ever used him properly, but... And this was one of those interesting times where there are probably at least a half dozen issues in the Marvel Team-Up run that are actually the Human Torch and a guest star. all of the rest are Spider-Man. The Human Torch, even though Johnny Storm, when he was written well in the Fantastic Four, always had a good sort of sarcastic sense of humor and always kind of played the foil to Ben Grimm. Not really a guy who carries his own comic too well. And a creation of Carl Burgos, who from the maybe even predating Marvel Comics, the very first issue of Marvel Comics. I'm not sure, but I mean, the Human Torch was very much a timely comics creation that Marvel kind of revived, and there was a lot of kerfuffle, should we say, or shall we say, in terms of how Carl Burgos was treated, and with Marvel, and how upset he was with the treatment of by Marvel, and the use of his character and his inability to regain the copyright. And it's a pretty sad story that, as detailed in Sean Howe's Marvel: The Untold Tales, and certainly worth reading. This is Marvel Team Up number 46, and that is a Rich Buckler cover. And Rich Buckler is the creator of Deathlock. Rich Buckler just passed away last month, very sadly. If you collected Marvel Comics, or bought Marvel or DC Comics for that matter, especially in the 70s and 80s, you saw a lot of covers by Rich Buckler. I mean, he was an absolute workhorse, and he wasn't a guy who consistently blew you away like some of the great cover artists from that period, but he was a guy who never let you down either. I mean, his covers were always really rock solid, always entertaining, and some of them were pretty spectacular. But he was a very, very capable artist. Let's see who did the interior art. Okay, this is Sal Buscema for sure, with Mike Esposito, and it's written by Bill Mantlo, so it's an entirely different creative team than these later issues, which were Claremont and Byrne. I've talked about Sal Buscema art a little bit before. He tends to draw a lot of faces that look exactly like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, all the gaping mouths. They almost all look the same. That's a Sal Buscema staple. He's a guy who kind of blazes through the work. I get the impression that he does it as fast as he possibly can. But he's very, very capable. Just probably not as skillful as his older brother John, but a guy who illustrated a ton of comics that I grew up with, and that anybody from that era probably grew up with reading. So, and there's a splash page. And once again, the gaping mouth. Spider-Man's mouth is gaping too. You just can't see it because he's got a mask on, but it's kind of classic Sal Buscema. I guess we'd be disappointed if it wasn't. And this is number 54. And that looks like a Gil Kane comic cover as well. Right there, that Hulk. I couldn't tell by Spider-Man, but the Hulk figure absolutely looks like Gil Kane, and so do some of these backing figures. And I believe this is also, I'm not sure. I thought this was maybe Byrne art, but I'm not sure that I remember. So maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. Let's take a look. Yes. Good. Okay, so this is John Byrne as well, and this is inked by Mike Esposito, who did the prior one with Sal Buscema. So, and Mike Esposito was a very solid inker as well. You see an advertisement for $6 Million Man. So this is from 1976. And it looks like Wood God, who was always an entertaining character. And the Hulk. John Byrne drew a really incredible Hulk, no pun intended. He didn't draw it too often, obviously, but when he did, he drew a really, really nice looking Hulk. Had some definition to him and to his face. Very expressive, but still extremely well drawn. And nice splash page. Everybody's pretty much locked up there. There's a good example of Byrne's Hulk. there's another one. You notice where Sal Buscema's, all of his gaping mouths seem to have no teeth. Byrne is a little bit more realistic in that fact, in that area. So there you go. A really nice issue, number 54. As I said, all of these comics I got for $2. And this one is really interesting. This is number 74, definitely not Byrne artwork, but this is a really strange one because this is Spider-Man and the Not Ready for Primetime Players, which is Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Jane Curtin, Garrett Morris, Bill Murray, Lorraine Newman, Gilda Radner, and Lorne Michaels, and Stan Lee himself, one of the many books in which Stan the Man appeared in. And there's Dan Aykroyd, that's probably Bill Murray, that looks like Gilda Radner, there's Garrett Morris, there's Jane Curtin, maybe that's Gilda Radner, I'm not quite sure. No, that's Lorraine Newman, so I think I got it right, and that's John Belushi, famously, passed away very early in his career, much like several other rotund comedians subsequently, but really strange. And that's, instead of Spider-Man and John Belushi, it's Spider-Man and Stan Lee, so as usual. But really interesting that they did this issue, and at the time I probably wouldn't have appreciated it very much because I like my comics to be pretty serious, and I wouldn't have gotten this. But pretty interesting that they, pop cultural sort of moment where the Marvel Universe intersects once again with the real world, and Saturday Night Live, I guess. Well, this is really nice art, actually. I think this is Bob Hall. Yeah, yes. And there you go, right there. A big double page splash of the Saturday Night Live sort of studios with Stan right there on the camera. And this was drawn by Bob Hall and Marie Severin. Marie Severin is John Severin's, I think, younger sister, and she did mostly colors, but she was a very talented artist in her own right. John Severin was an extremely talented artist, and I think they both worked at EC Comics together when they were very young. Really nice drawing of Mary Jane. There's Peter. And, yeah, Stan is supposedly the host of Saturday Night Live, with Stan's special musical guest, Rick Jones, which is kind of a funny inside joke. Rick Jones, Captain Marvel's sort of musical alter ego. And this was written by Chris Claremont. And this was probably a very high-profile comic from Marvel at the time. Whether it was ever mentioned on Saturday Night Live, I don't know. But I'm sure some of the cast at least maybe saw it or aware of it. And nice likenesses. I don't know if, okay, well that's, I think that's Gilda Radner. Yeah, so pretty interesting. And somehow they managed to incorporate some fighting scenes in here too. There's Dan Aykroyd. And John Belushi, who sometimes played in the Samurai Deli on Saturday Night Live, so very fitting that he's got a samurai sword and ends up fighting the Silver Samurai, is it? So, pretty interesting. And, yeah. Spoiler alert if you don't want to see the ending. But, yeah, pretty interesting comic. Certainly worth getting for $2. And, pretty happy to have it. And actually very nice shape, even though I just thumbed through it. I don't know, I'd say probably fine. Okay, and this is Marvel Team Up number 63, Spider-Man Iron Fist. Actually, I already have a copy of it, but this is probably an upgrade, and it's only $2. Really well-drawn issue by John Byrne again, and I believe Dan Atkins, unless it's Dan Green. No, I'm sorry, Dave Hunt, I think. Instead of thumbing through this, though, I have this one, which I did not own, number 64. Same art team, same story, basically. This one was Spider-Man and Iron Fist. This is Daughters of the Dragon, which includes Misty Knight, I assume, who was Iron Fist's girlfriend. His very sexy girlfriend at the time. John Byrne drew her beautifully, as always, and get a little Japanese sort of image right there. I don't even know what the oh, I guess that's a poster on the wall. Okay, done in sort of a really interesting sort of ukiyo-e style, which was the Japanese style of sort of just pen and ink, basically, wood print that was mostly done by Hokusai and Yoshitoshi. If you've ever seen, I mean, actually a lot of hentai actually was originated by Hokusai, of all things, back in the, I believe, the 18th century, but it may have been the early 19th century. But it's also, if you've ever seen Samurai Champloo, that's done during the Edo period of Japan, where Hokusai and Yoshitoshi were thriving, and wood print art was like, you know, and there was a lot of art that looked in this style, and so that's kind of a tip of the hat to that from John Byrne, because of course Iron Fist is into the martial arts. And Misty Knight, Iron Fist, really beautifully drawn once again. And I said, yes, Dave Hunt did a really nice job on these. And I actually like his inking a lot on John Byrne as well. He kind of does it in a very unobtrusive style. Lets Byrne's figures breathe, doesn't overshadow them or laden them with a lot of ink. And really nice. Some great action with Iron Fist. And we get to the end with the rare and beautiful interracial kiss, which is not something you saw very often in the 70s. Obviously, the big pop cultural moment of note at that time, I think, was the kiss between William Shatner and Nichelle Nichols on Star Trek, and that was in the late 60s. And I guess that would probably sent some tremors. But believe it or not, there were stores in the South that wouldn't even carry probably comic books if they saw this. They may have just magically sort of not ordered that issue if they knew that that was in there, even at the time. And there may even still be stores like that now, but far fewer. But you know, it's pretty cool that Danny Rand and Misty Knight were a couple, and as once again, beautifully drawn by John Byrne. So, very cool page, and I like that issue. And next issue is Captain Britain, which I believe I have, but I don't remember exactly. And again, a nice copy. And finally, we have Marvel Team Up number 67, and again, a really nice copy. This looks like a Byrne cover, I think, but and it definitely has Byrne art inside. Tigra and Kraven the Hunter. I guess we'll take a quick look at that and then move on to the next package. Okay, and this is Byrne and Hunt again. They're a really good team. And really great sort of half page, 3/4 page, or 2/3 page splash. Kraven and Spider-Man, one of his earliest villains. If you saw the way Steve Ditko drew Kraven, he almost looked like it was pretty ridiculous. And in fact, this costume was absolutely ridiculous. And seems to be a Steve Ditko. I think Steve Ditko probably created Kraven or designed it. And it seems to be a Steve Ditko sort of staple. This all this hair. I mean, he was a hunter. The cheetah print tights. The mustache and everything else. But I mean, a really ludicrous outfit, which is probably why you haven't seen Kraven in one of the movies, but they would certainly redesign it. But if you look at it, he's kind of Marvel's version of the Creeper, which also had a very similar sort of style and outfit, even though more outrageous, because the Creeper was green and had green flowing, whatever that is, hair, sort of a hair cape. Really bizarre stuff. And, yeah. If you saw somebody running around with, like that, I mean, certainly with most villains, probably call the local asylum, but, if you saw a grown man dressed like that, I mean, you know, it's pretty ridiculous. But then again, I mean, Spider-Man's not exactly dressed normally either. But beautiful, beautiful splash page. I have this issue. I don't remember this page, and it's really nice. Really nicely drawn. That's kind of the sort of stuff that made John Byrne a big, big star when he went to the X-Men, of course. And I have a lot of those X-Men with John Byrne that I actually bought when they came out from the spinner rack. So one day in the future, I will go through some of those issues and actually crack them open and take a look at them. Because I'm sure I've forgotten a lot of things, and I'm sure there's a lot of really incredible art to be seen. And another really nice page. You can see a giraffe, an elephant, maybe a rhino, water buffalo, lion, and Kraven, of course, riding them all. And that is the end. And of course the next issue was the Man-Thing issue. Really nice. Maybe the best drawn issue of them all. But they're all quite nice. And Marvel Team Up, as I've said before, along with Marvel 2-in-1, probably one of the funnest series that Marvel had out in the Bronze Age. And these books are not very expensive. As I say, I bought all of these for $2 each. I think it was $18. I don't know. I think it was $18. I don't remember how many books I just showed, but they're not expensive, and yet you see how high quality they are, and particularly the Byrne issues, and those are ones I was looking for specifically, just because I enjoyed the art so much. And they're actually really good stories. I don't think I'll go back and read any of them, but I mean, Chris Claremont, obviously one of the best writers that Marvel had. And he wrote most of those, and Bill Mantlo was the other. And Bill Mantlo also one of the better writers that Marvel had. So here we go through this. You can see right through there, there's a Star Wars issue. And some of these I actually have. There's only probably 4 or 5 comics in this package. There are 1, 2, 3, yeah, I think there are 5. Okay. But there are 5 really good ones. Okay, first of all, number 41 is Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back adaptation. And as I've also spoken about, I love Al Williamson art. And Al Williamson and Carlos Garzón, their work on The Empire Strikes Back was, along with Blade Runner and Return of the Jedi, and even Flash Gordon, which I actually am ordering, is some of the best stuff from that time period ever. And Al Williamson's art, going back to his time at EC Comics when he worked a lot with Frank Frazetta and Angelo Torres and Reed Crandall and Roy Krinkle, just absolute masters of just masters of cartooning, masterful artists in general, and guys who could just about draw anything. They drew in a very naturalistic style, but you saw Neil Adams come in the 60s and 70s and draw in a much more natural style, but Neil Adams, as great as he was, as talented as he was, I don't think he had the elegance or the idiosyncratic sort of approach that you saw from the EC artist. But anyway, I think I have this issue. I'm pretty sure I have this issue. And so, but seeing it, again, I think these were relatively cheap. I don't remember now the prices on these, but this may have been $3. I'm not sure, but I decided to buy it again. But this one I did not have. number 43, and pretty excited to get it. I actually have the collection. I have the Empire Strikes Back in the Marvel Super Special, which is of course still Al Williamson. It just has a different cover and it's all collected. But I didn't own this cover, and I don't even recall seeing this cover very much, you know, so it still looks pretty new and different to me. But let's go ahead and take a look inside and take a look at Al Williamson's art. And also get a look at what kind of copy this is. Yeah, just a little bit of discoloration on the back. Relatively flat, and this issues. But I mean, I'm not expecting these to be incredibly valuable by any stretch of the imagination, even though Star Wars obviously continues to accrue value as long as the movies remain popular, which seems like will be the case forever. And right away, the artwork is absolutely beautiful. As you can see, Archie Goodwin, writer and editor, Al Williamson, and Carlos Garzon. And beautiful. Even on this paper, even on newsprint, it's obviously a little bit better on, or a lot better on some nice white glossy paper. Sometimes I like the look of newsprint, sort of the muted look of newsprint more. But in Williamson's case, his work is so delicate and sometimes so beautifully shaded by Garzon that, you know, it looks better. The better paper is better for how delicate his lines are. And they still shine. They're still absolutely beautiful, even on newsprint. But an artist this skillful, you don't want to muddy up his artwork at all in any, you know, in any fashion. So, and you can see so many, you know, a lot of delicate line work, all of this sort of shading, which is very much harkens back to his work on EC when he was doing the weird science fantasy stuff. He always, and he was born originally in South America. I forget, I think maybe Argentina, and then his family moved to America, or maybe he was born in the United States and his family lived in Argentina for a while, and near the rainforest, I believe. And so he was always just absolutely brilliant at drawing, you know, these sort of scenes that were set in jungles and, you know, with lizards and all kinds of flora and fauna roaming around. So putting him on, you know, the planet with Yoda, allowing him to draw that sort of stuff is just perfect for him, as well as he's great at drawing spaceships and all of this other stuff. And then this is what's cool, okay? This is not what's in, this isn't in the Star Wars Super Special, so it's just worth it for me to get the normal monthly issue, just to get to see a little bit of these extras. This is an extra, and that's just by Terry Austin. Terry Austin, obviously best known as an inker on John Byrne, as we just saw, Terry Austin 1980, but absolutely capable as a penciler. He penciled some issues of Indiana Jones, the movie adaptation of that. So that's a really beautiful sort of pin-up for him, with all of his sort of incredible technique with cross-hatching. And then, oh, even nicer. Wow, really nice. I'll be looking forward to maybe posting this image on the some of the Bronze Age boards. Michael Golden. And Michael Golden did not do many issues of Star Wars. In fact, he only did one. He did Star Wars number 38, which just preceded this adaptation of The Empire Strikes Back. That's the only one he did, and it is the most beautiful issue of Star Wars that was done in this era in Marvel, aside from the Al Williamson issues. And you can see why, especially when he's given a little room to breathe and some time to work on something, you know, beautiful drawings. And then, rendered by X-Men penciler and co-plotter John Byrne. Surprising. I almost thought that was Carmine Infantino. It's so simplistic. If you look at it, the robot is Pretty well drawn, I guess, but I wouldn't have anticipated that was John Byrne. But nice. And then, Marie Severin. We were just talking about her. She inked the Marvel team up with the Saturday Night Live. So it all kind of comes together, and I wasn't aware that these were even in this issue, and that's beautifully drawn. Marie Severin got very little penciling jobs at Marvel, very few, I assume, but mostly coloring. But you can see, really talented artist. Beautiful, beautiful drawing. If it shows up. And then, interestingly enough, Frank Miller. So, kind of like a who's who. Really worth it just to get this book just for these pinups that are not included in the super special. At least not that I remember. So you get Frank Miller and Marie Severin, Michael Golden, John Byrne, and John Byrne's inker Terry Austin, who also did a really beautiful drawing. Great issue. Very happy to have that beautiful cover. And then this is number 44. I definitely have this one. But I love his art so much, I was happy to get a duplicate. And I think it was relatively cheap. So that is 44, 43, 41. I have 40 and probably 42. I'm not sure about 39, but I think I do. And okay, so we have two more, and these are really interesting as well. I forgot that I ordered this one. Mr. Miracle number 3. And this, I believe, is in good or very good condition at best. I think it's good. Looking at it, you can see a rusty staple here. You can see a rusty staple here. A little bit of spine roll. And, you know, a fair amount of soiling, a little bit of creasing, a little bit of distress down here. Interesting cover. Essentially, Kirby just penciled this and just left it uncolored for whatever reason. I'm not sure if that's a lighting effect or whatever, but Kirby in this period, I mean, he just drew so much amazing stuff. Interestingly, these faces actually, maybe this is where Sal Buscema got his sort of gaping mouth approach, because maybe he's looking at a lot of Jack Kirby. That actually looks a little bit like Jack Kirby even. But let's look inside, because I'm dying to see what the Kirby art looks like inside. Kirby did so much work, and it's almost all amazing. Almost all fascinating. Oh, boy. Okay, this is not something that he revealed. And it's not terribly important. I mean, this would be maybe a reasonably valuable, maybe it's a $10, $15 book if it's in really good shape, maybe very fine. This has a really nasty, it's got sliced. So, yeah, I don't think he mentioned that. In which case, I mean, definitely good, maybe not even good, maybe fair. But you can enjoy the art, because that's really why I buy these comics, to enjoy the art. I'm not buying them as a great investment, because for the most part I'm buying them for $2, $3, $4, $5 sometimes. And I can absolutely enjoy looking at panels like that. Look at those fingers. And then, you know, just, I don't know, the primal sort of power of Kirby. Probably do an episode of this vlog just on some Kirby stuff, and you can barely even scratch the surface. There have been books on Kirby by Mark Evanier, who was kind of an assistant and a historian of Kirby, and by numerous other people. You know, lots of Kirby coverage, and you still barely scratch the surface. This was famously, you know, it was written, drawn, and edited by Kirby. It was inked by Vinnie Coletta, who got a lot of flack for sort of not being too respectful of Kirby's pencils. But still, it's Kirby. Can't really mess it up. You can try. You can erase some of his pencils, but you can't really mess it up because he's just so good. And this was kind of I would say this era was sort of at the peak of his powers. He was doing a lot of... This was after he had left Marvel, I think, the first time. After he finished, kind of had a falling out with Marvel, and after, like, the incredible runs on Fantastic Four and Thor, and pretty much doing everything at Marvel. Went to DC and Mr. Miracle and the Forever People, his Fourth World sort of saga, which critics, in retrospect, think maybe was his finest work, but it was not his most popular work by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly not when compared to Fantastic Four. But Kirby is Kirby, and there's just some kind of primal power and crazy sort of creativity. He is he's the legendary creator within the mainstream of comics. He is the American Miyazaki, the American Tezuka, and the American Mobius by comparisons. Except he preceded all of those guys. So they actually were more likely inspired by him than he was by them. Really nice looking poster for Zeppelin, the movie. I wonder who drew that, but not really sure, but it starred Michael York and Elkie Summer. And that's it. So 15 cents. Let's see what year it was. 1971. 15 cents. Very early bronze or very late silver. Good, fair, pretty poor shape, but the interiors and the artwork are really nice. And it actually looks good on camera, looking at it. Color still pops. And this is the last issue I have, and it is The Power of Warlock #1, and I believe I paid $4 or $5 for this. It's not in great shape. I think, again, it's very good. I see a little bit of a crease there. I see a lot of stress along the spine. A lot of sort of stress increasing along the bottom. But the frame where the art is looks beautiful. And I believe that's a Gil Kane cover. This is before Jim Starlin sort of took over. So it's definitely a Gil Kane cover. And I think Gil Kane did the interior art as well. So talking about so far, we're talking about John Byrne, Jack Kirby, Gil Kane, very little bit of Sal Buscema in there, and Al Williamson, Carlos Garzon, inkers like Terry Austin, Bob Wycheck, Dan Atkins, Ricardo Villamonte. Pretty much a stellar list of artists. And yes, this is written by Roy Thomas and drawn by Gil Kane. And inked by Tom Sutton, another really fine artist who did a lot of pencils and inks. But and that's with the High Evolutionary. #1, Warlock, published in 1972. So this was a 20-cent comic published in 1972, and Mr. Miracle was published in 1971. And there's an interesting thing there. Marvel, apparently, going by Sean Howe's book, Marvel pulled a little trick on DC where they announced that they were going to have 15-cent comics. They were going up from 10 cents or 12 cents to 15 cents, right? So DC, hearing of this, they went up to 15 cents. But Marvel had already planned on going up to 20 cents. So they had supposedly, and I may be wrong on this, but this is the way I read it, supposedly Marvel had 1 month of comic releases that were 15 cents, and then the very next week they were up to 20 cents. And DC, for whatever reason, because of their scheduling or whatever, they weren't anticipating any of this. So DC stayed at 15 cents, and Marvel raked in a lot more profit. It seems kind of strange. You would think the cheaper comic would be would sell more, and so the whatever profit would balance out, even though Marvel was making an extra nickel. But it kind of makes sense seeing these comics side by side. I mean, this is 1971, this is 1972, and this is 15, and this is 20, so that kind of bears out that maybe was the case, but I'm not really sure. I'd have to go back and look at it. This is, the back cover is a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit separated. Like, it is separated from this, from the bottom staple. Top staple's fine. The cover still feels nice, but it definitely has some wear and tear. I'd say very good to good. I think he rated it. I'm not sure. I think he had it very good. But once again, Gil Kane work, and really a good era when Gil Kane was really at his peak as well, and sort of his classic sort of dynamic figure drawing. But this was when Roy Thomas was doing so much work at Marvel as an editor, kind of taking over Stan Lee's role as an editor, and kind of the guy who wrote so many books at Marvel and was just absolutely swamped with an amount of work at Marvel. But so I do not remember reading. I never had these early Warlocks. This is the first time I've ever seen this book. I love the drawing. I think it's beautifully drawn by Gil Kane and Tom Sutton. But Roy Thomas was still a relatively conventional writer, best known for his stuff on Conan, All-Star Squadron for DC, and tons and tons of books. I mean, I think he wrote, the initial X-Men, maybe after Stan Lee, and certainly worked in Avengers and everything else. But I think, even though this looks like a really interesting story, I think this was still relatively conventional. And then when Jim Starlin came along, it ceased being a superhero book, and Jim Starlin was doing a lot of drugs and was a Vietnam vet and had some issues to work out as regards that. So he really took it in a really crazy place. He was a lapsed Catholic, so there was a lot of religious references, and then he sort of bucked against the system in terms of, any kind of editorial interference. So he really took it to a whole different world. And this is always worth looking at, these letters pages, especially from this era, because you would see, sometimes you would see prose, a lot of prose, and this is, I've never seen this many prose on one letters column, who would, people who would eventually become pros in the comics industry, but at the time they were just fans. But right here you have Mark DeMatteis, who would go on to be J.M. DeMatteis, who has wrote numerous comics for Marvel, and probably still does, and I think he may have written some novels as well. J.M. DeMatteis, when he was in Brooklyn. And then here you have another really interesting name, Richard Penny. That would have to be Richard and Wendy Penny, who did ElfQuest, and from Cambridge, Massachusetts. So that's also really interesting. He's talking about the characterizations came through very clearly. High evolutionary, while nearly omnipotent, is still tied to his human mortal past, and he handles his powers and himself with much more feeling and concern than your other ultra-powerful types like Galactus and the Watcher. And then, one more name that's easy to overlook is Stephen D. Grant. That's probably Stephen Grant, the writer. Another guy who's written so many works and actually had a column on comic book resources for quite a long time, probably still does. So that's also pretty interesting. Warlock is fascinating. Sweeping tour de force is a fascinating sweeping tour de force. And those are the names that I recognize. I don't think any of these others, but I mean, that's three eventual comic pros, two major writers, and Richard Penny, who along with his wife Wendy created ElfQuest on the first letters page. So that's pretty cool. It's always like a little glimpse into history that if you don't know, now you know. So Near the end, all those classic sort of Kane faces when he was drawing really beautiful stuff. I like all the shading and sort of the definition of their faces. And Kane, very erudite gentleman, an extremely talented artist. And that is Warlock #1. Beautiful issue. Not in the best shape, but better shape than Mr. Miracle, that's for sure. But that is the whole box, or that whole package. So it was like 5 comics, 3 Star Wars, which were all Empire Strikes Back adaptations, Mr. Miracle #3, and Warlock #1. And of course all of those Marvel team-ups. And those are 2 small packages, and I'll have some more stuff maybe coming in soon, but other than that, I've got plenty of other projects to work on. So thanks for watching, and by all means, if you're watching this video, I would love to hear a comment. I love to talk to people and tell me what you think. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, bye.